Welcome to The Story Behind the Story. I'm Todd Duplantis. We're going to take a look at Houston history over the past couple of decades, offering you a perspective you might not see on traditional shows. This is called The Story Behind the Story. Welcome to the show. If you're watching us on HCC TV, social media, YouTube, make sure you subscribe to us. But you can download all of our podcasts at hccs.edu/podcasts. We've got a very special guest for you today, Scott E. Berrett. Now, Scotty is one of the founding reporters for CNN. He helped launch the first business news cable show, Business Times. He beat CNN for an ACE Award for the best news show on cable, brought into the Houston news market by his former executive producer at CNN, helped launch the Fox series, City Under Siege, and he went back into the business reporting, or back into the business reporting business at KNWS. Scotty is joining us here for The Story Behind the Story. So glad to have you here.
It's been almost 30 years.
Yeah, almost 30 years. Now, tell a quick story. 28 years ago, it was the summer of 1992, I was interning at Fox, and I didn't know whether I wanted to be a meteorologist or if I wanted to go into reporting, news reporting. So they send me out on the streets with Scotty, and we go driving around, and I learn more about stories. But then I decided this is the place you want to be. You want to be in the truck, looking at, on the streets of Houston, looking to find the story. So I just threw away the whole meteorological thing and decided I wanted to be a news reporter. And it was because of that summer working with you, and that was, man, it's hard to believe, 28 years ago.
And we're still alive.
And that was that's right. That was at KRIV, and you were working as a reporter there. And we're going to talk more about KRIV, but one thing I wanted to talk about is, before we get to City Under Siege and all that, I want to talk about your career at CNN, because I find it fascinating that you were one of the founding reporters there.
That's right, 1980, June, we fired it up. And everybody thought it was like the hula hoop of television news. It would not survive.
There was nothing like it then.
No.
And cable was in its infancy, more or less.
That's right.
And what were some of the challenges? I mean, everybody's telling you this isn't going to work, this isn't going to work, but you get out there and you've got to make it work.
We had to have the first computerized newsroom.
Wow.
Basic News Feed.
Yeah. Everybody was using typewriters.
Everybody was using typewriters before. We had to maximize our use of live truck shots, live shots.
Right.
Nobody else was doing that. So it was exciting.
When was the time you realized that, wait a second, this is starting to work? You know, because there must have been some going on the air, there's an anticipation, but you're ready to go, you're ready to get on. Then you get on the air, but there's got to be that time where somebody maybe comes up to you and says, hey, I saw your story, but you're realizing this is working.
Well, in Washington, D.C., on cable, they didn't have cable per se in Washington, so we were not recognized.
It's amazing, isn't it?
In Washington, D.C., we were not, and that was actually helpful.
Yeah.
To get into certain situations you needed to get into.
And you were talking, we talked about a situation, and we've got some video of this that you sent us as well, about your reporting with Ronald Reagan. You were there the day he was shot.
Well, I was in the newsroom. We heard the reports on the radio from the Secret Service, rawhide down, shots fired.
And you knew that was the code for the president?
That was the code for the president, for the Secret Service code. I got in a cab and went to George Washington University Hospital. Andrew Stroud went to Bethesda. That's where they would take the president. Normally, another reporter went to Georgetown. I arrived there. There was the limo. There was what appeared to be bullet damage on the right door, back door. Right. I walked in, here was Nancy Reagan coming, and I followed her in. I looked down, there was a presidential cufflink on the ground. Mm-hmm. They'd obviously taken off his shirt.
And you said they didn't know he was shot at first,
He
right?
didn't know he was shot.
That's amazing.
As they were going back to the White House, he complained of pain in his side, thought he'd broken a rib being thrown in the limo.
Wow.
He got in, they realized it was a .22 caliber in the side, and at that point, Lynn Nofziger came out. Lynn had been Ronald Reagan's press secretary in California when he was governor. He was a special consultant to the White House. He knew me, I knew him. I looked in his eye, he looked in mine, and he said, he's been shot once in the left chest. I looked down the hallway, Jim Brady, the president's press secretary, had also been wounded, but he wasn't shot he was shot in the head. And I was looking at him down the hallway. They were working on him.
Right.
The president was to the left, behind the glass, in the intensive care unit, being serviced. I said, who? The president's been shot once in the left chest. Whoa.
Wow.
On the radio. At that point, Secret Service realized I wasn't White House staff.
Yeah.
Again, I got
Yeah.
somewhere because I wasn't recognized. I was picked up by the elbows, and I radioed the newsroom. The president's been shot once in the left chest. Jim Hensel was on the assignment desk. Who's your source? One source, Nofziger. You hear, and you hear it. Jim comes up behind Bernie Shaw, who's on the air live.
Yeah.
We just fed the video of Nancy Reagan arriving. And again, nobody in television news was doing things that fast.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
quickly, turning around that video. And he was narrating it. And you hear Bernie going, who does?
Right.
Scott Berrett reports, well, the president didn't even know he'd been shot.
been shot,
People at the hotel where he was shot by John Hinckley didn't know he'd been shot.
You know, in what I found fascinating, you mentioned something before that you had actually snuck into the building a few times, into the hospital, and that's what got you arrested.
I got arrested that night, yeah. But there was a real good reason for
Yeah.
it. Because we were hearing, we knew the president was shot. Was he conscious? He was definitely not able to perform his functions as president of the United States,
Right.
which brings into the issue of the 25th Amendment. And then I hear in my ear, in those days, it was a radio with the IFB attached to the
Yeah,
studio.
yeah.
So I'm hearing air only what I'm hearing. And I'm hearing Al Haig, the Secretary of State, who, remember, is fourth in line.
Right.
Behind the president, the vice president, the Speaker of the House, and the secretary. I'm hearing Al Haig at the White House saying, I'm in control here.
Because they couldn't get a hold of anybody else.
Well,
right?
nobody knew where the vice president was or the speaker. Well, we had not received word of what their situation was.
Yeah.
The president's been shot. Is this a coup attempt? Is this an action by the Soviet Union?
You didn't know.
We didn't know.
Right.
And with Al Haig saying, I'm in control here, you've got to
start
wonder,
thinking it's a coup.
Has the 25th
Yeah.
Amendment taken effect, and is the Secretary of State now the head of state?
Right. And
That's why
what it
I
looked
had to
like.
keep getting back in that hospital to find out what the condition of the president was. And to find out, Nancy Reagan got there, wasn't the vice president there?
Yeah.
Where was Speaker Tip O'Neill?
Right.
Were they
couldn't get a hold of him. Yeah.
Well, whether they couldn't get a hold of them or that they were dispensed with, like Ronald Reagan had
Right.
been, all
You
of those
didn't know.
things go through your mind as a reporter. I had to get back in. So they arrested me. They threw me in the back of the squad car. They took me to the precinct. I paid my $15 fine for crossing a police line. It was
Right.
back on the air an hour later.
Back to make a live shot.
Back to do a live shot. Then we saw a priest walking in, and that's when ABC, NBC, CBS all reported Jim Brady was dead.
Wow.
I couldn't
Yeah.
report that.
Yeah.
I had.
You knew he wasn't.
Well, I didn't know that he wasn't,
Yeah.
but I know that just because a priest comes in to give last rites,
That doesn't mean he's
that
dead.
doesn't mean
Yeah,
he's dead.
No, they're getting
and you cannot jump to those conclusions. Stuart Laurie was the managing editor at the time. He came from print. Did not understand the efficacy of live television news.
Right.
Confirming your sources. No, I'd already broken one rule. I'd gone with one source on Nofziger.
Yeah.
But I knew, and he knew me, and I knew that he was giving me the straight skinny. And that's why Bill Hensel, and
Right.
no one would have reported the president had been shot for hours
If
we'd not done that. And you see in the back of the monitors at CNN while Bernie and Daniel Shore are on the air,
Right.
you see Frank Reynolds hit the top of his head and say, "Let's get it right, people," after
man.
they had reported that Jim Brady
He had
was
died.
dead. But he hadn't. And we all know he didn't.
Right.
The
because
Brady
of
bill.
abridgment. We're talking with Scotty Berrett, former television news reporter here in Houston and also of CNN. We're going to talk about one thing you worked on and were instrumental in starting, City Under Siege. That was on Fox 26 News. I worked there as well. We'll be back after this and we'll have more. Stay tuned to the story behind the story.
This is Matthew. He's a high school student on the track team. He's trying to decide who to ask to homecoming, but an easier decision was to get dual college history credit from Houston Community College. HCC, for everyone, anytime. Meet Elizabeth. She's a mom on her way to get groceries. She's also on her way to getting an associate's degree at Houston Community College that could help provide for her family. HCC, for everyone, anytime.
Welcome back to The Story Behind the Story. I'm Todd Duplantis, joined today by Scotty Berrett, former television news reporter, an old colleague of mine, one of my mentors when I first started in this business 28 years ago. Appreciate you taking the time and joining me here.
Love to see you.
You know, you were working for Fox 26 when I started interning there and later worked for them, but you worked there during the late 80s, early 90s. And this was when the city of Houston was much different than it is now. We were coming out of a recession. Industry was changing here. We were moving the focus away from just being the energy capital of the world to diversify Houston. Crime, though, was up because there was a police shortage. Did these factors play into the need for having City Under Siege, the series on Fox?
City Under Siege was a creation of Will J. Wright, my former executive producer at CNN, and our news director, the first African-American news director in the history of Houston. And it was his creation, and it was his concern that we were not looking more carefully at the effect of drugs and crime and vice versa.
Right.
One thing that, when he found out I'd moved to Houston, I basically left the morning business shows on ESPN and come down here. When he found out I was in town, this was before the internet, before email, you know, he just found out.
Right.
And he said, Scotty, come over. Because he was tired of having to cover minorities getting busted.
Right.
That was not what he wanted. What he wanted to look at were the intricacies of the financial issues involving the war on drugs. And that's why with my business news coverage experience, I engaged in an ongoing series called Follow the Money. Mm-hmm. Remember what Deep Throat told Bob Woodward? But you follow the money. And so my money laundering series, and I know that's why we were an Emmy Award-winning show, because we didn't just look at the crime.
Right.
We looked at the causes of the crime and the instruments of business that are associated with the drug business.
Right. And City Under Siege started, the Fox network was just blossoming there. And Fox 26 has always been an O&O, owned and operated by the network. So it kind of fit this maverick, the Fox network, when it started off, you had animated, you had reality shows, Cops was there. So City Under Siege seemed like the perfect fit. And you guys had the 9 o'clock news block. It started as a series, then it made itself its own half-hour show. 9:30
to 10 was and of course we had three reporters doing 1, 2, and 3 magazine-style 12 8-minute pieces a week.
Yeah.
So it was
you're doing stuff you'd see normally on Nightline or 60 Minutes.
It was kind of like being a short order cook,
Yeah.
cooking pancakes at different temperatures on the grill with regard to which story you would flip for that week.
Well, you know, it's funny because when I did start interning at Fox, they had me work with Ford Atkinson. He was the executive producer there at City Under Siege, and then they sent me out on the street with you. So I was immersed in this City Under Siege thing, and I was just fascinated with the start of Fox, because really, you look back at it now, and it was really you're witnessing history then, because you always had the CBS, NBC, ABC, and then a few independents. But Fox came along, and it was exciting, it was new, and it was a maverick.
It was.
You know, and for what you guys were doing, it was a different style than you would see at, say, the Channel 11s or the Channel 13s. You know what you could get over there, but boy, you tune into the Fox News, especially City Under Siege, to get something different.
We would go into doors with our body armor on behind the cops, and we would see what was behind those doors.
Right.
And show everyone what was behind.
Yeah.
Now, with regard to issues of privacy.
Their laws were different then.
We didn't have the litigious problems we would have now.
Yeah.
To do that kind of coverage. And years later, I would be accosted by people who, you busted me. I didn't bust you. I covered you being busted.
I wasn't me. I wasn't putting you in handcuffs.
I just covered you, sir.
Well, you know, you watch the old Cops episodes, and you can see a shift with the new ones, and even the live PD, which is turned into a beast of its own.
Yeah,
You know,
that's-
but you watch those, and like when City Under Siege was around, you could walk in that house with the cameras blazing. Now the laws are different, where it's all covered from really outside the residence for those privacy laws, correct?
Yeah, exactly, because we have gotten litigious.
Yeah.
Doing true journalism in television news today, there is a big question mark.
Yeah.
It is, I would like to say, in intensive care.
Well, you know, it really is, and I hate to say it, but people ask me all the time, why did you get out of the business? Like, well, the business changed. I mean, I was in the business for a couple of decades, but man, it changed dramatically, and it really happened not within a 20-year period, but like in a 4 to 5 year
4 to
period,
5.
You know,
And technology now has changed the business so dramatically. I mean, you're seeing reporters now gathering their own stories without a photog,
Right.
without a second man,
right?
walking around with their iPhones. Well,
Doing it all.
That's okay. But you need a team.
Yeah, you really do, you know, and that's one of the things, and with you guys, and what I was able to learn is working with that team, an executive producer, but have a news director that trusts what you do,
Yeah.
you know, and that stands up for you.
And you got to
and
have
you
a
had that.
photog out there with you.
Oh, yeah.
At your back. You be at their back.
Yeah, and I know you had a lot of them, and I've been there, and it was so cool when I was a young reporter to be in that back seat listening to you guys, because I was fascinated with the arguments y'all would get into, because you'd want to show something, and the photographer didn't, and you're like, we got to. And
Damon
next
or
thing you know-
Juan would say.
Yeah, and you're on the phone with somebody in the newsroom and ask them if you could do it.
Yeah. Yes. And there was, and that's part of the journalistic
Yeah.
effort. It is a confrontation.
Right.
It is a clash of ideas that end up
Right.
producing a product.
You went on from Fox, and you worked. It was funny because I went to work for KNWS, and we'll talk about that
Oh,
for
yeah.
a few
Yeah,
brief
that
moments.
was-
And I remember running into you there, and you changed your look, you know, and
I
you were
shaved
doing
my head.
You were doing business reporting again, so you kind of got back into that.
Well,
for a little while.
again, the City Under Siege genre. For security, it kind of changed my appearance.
Yeah,
My-
right. Yeah, that's what you told me that day.
Because I got, I got people coming up to me.
Yeah.
And I didn't bust you, sir.
Right,
You know?
right.
Anyway.
But yeah, KNWS, that had everybody really hoping for a lot, because it was a 24-hour local news network. They were saying they were modeling themselves off of CNN, and I think when they first started, people were thinking, oh, that's cool, we're going to have bureaus at City Hall and bureaus on the west side of town, a bureau at the Astrodome to talk about sports. They went in there with that, but it just kind of never worked out for them.
We're talking about cost-effective
Oh,
analysis.
yeah.
You know, it is expensive to do television news.
Oh, it sure is, you know.
And a lot of that expense is the legal burden,
Yeah.
the litigious burden.
Right. But that's the cost of doing business when you're in news then. Back then.
Back-
Nowadays, it's a lot more homogenized, and you don't have to worry about that. We're going to talk more about that, because I want to talk about the technology. We covered it briefly. We'll talk about some of the technology we used then and where they are now, because it's totally changed, and it's changed the face of reporting.
Yes.
Scotty Berrett's joining me today on The Story Behind the Story. Great to have him in here. He's one of the founding reporters for CNN. I had a chance to work with him years ago, and he's here for The Story Behind the Story. We'll be back after this.
This is Mac. She's ready to build herself a house and a business. But first, she's building her resume with a construction certification from Houston Community College. HCC, for everyone, anytime.
I've seen people's lives change just by attending a class at HCC.
Some of them might not have the financial means to go to a four-year university. That doesn't make them any less quote-unquote smart than the kids who go to a four-year school.
HCC is easy to get to. It's easy to apply and easy to become a part of.
It gave me so much confidence.
Once you finish your 2 years there, you can transition into a four-year university or go into the workforce.
It's affordable, it's accessible, it changes lives.
Meet Saskia. She loves cars. Seriously, she whistles at them. So she's studying engineering at Houston Community College. After that, a 4-year degree. Then it's off to the races. HCC, for everyone, anytime.
Welcome back to The Story Behind the Story. I'm Todd Duplantis. Glad to have you joining us today. We're talking with Scotty Berrett, former television news reporter here in Houston and really worked all over the place. CNN, one of the founding reporters there. We were talking about how the industry's changed, and it's kind of going in a different direction now. I imagine a lot of that has to do with the technology they're using.
The iPhone,
Yeah.
more than 1080p,
Right.
high quality video on a phone.
Yeah.
That a reporter can walk out in the field, grab the shots he needs, feed them back to the station on his iPhone, no live truck.
Right.
And then talk in the phone to the newsroom during the show. No reporter, no photographer.
Yeah.
No live shot technician. I mean, in the old days, we even had a lighting guy that came along with us.
And back in the days when you started in news, you were more than likely one-man bands, but you had a camcorder pack, the camera, cables that going into it, the big bulky tapes.
Oh.
You know, it was 1 inch, then ½ inch.
Yeah,
you
the
know.
deck.
Yeah, the deck that you were.
The
Yeah.
deck.
So, I mean, you're carrying 40, 50 pounds equipment at least. Now it's all done with this. You know, we had a reporter show up here to do a story, and I was talking to her. I said, well, if you want to bring your truck and tell them to meet you in back, you're welcome to do your live shot there. She said, no, I'll be doing my live shot off my phone. I just
Exactly.
jump out of my car when I'm ready to go. Okay,
But-
that's the way it's going.
But think about it.
Yeah.
You know, television technicians are no longer really needed in the field.
well, they need to be in the field, but in the studio, they're invaluable because you need somebody to fix your computers, and they're turned into all around techs.
Yes.
You know, you're not just a broadcast technician; you're all around, knowing it all.
And one of the things that I find interesting is these new reporters don't understand how important it is to have a second person, to have a team.
Yeah.
They go out with their phone, their little phone, they definitely can miss things.
Yeah, it's always good to have a team, and you learn that in the field. You know, one of the funny things about technology, back at City Hall, when we used to cover City Hall, when in the old days, before cell phones, watching the theater within the council members and the mayor, because they were all, after they'd say something, they had these phones next to them. You remember they used to get on the phone and they'd call another council member, and you could watch the council member they're calling.
Get the call.
Yeah, take the call, and that's what kind of played it out, and that's how you knew it was going on.
No longer.
Yeah. Now they're all texting everything. It's a whole different ballgame. And I was always taught, you know, we were talking, you mentioned this on one of the phone calls we had earlier, but the IFB, back in the day, we were using radio signal for that.
Yeah, yeah.
You remember that? And IFB is what we had in our ear when we get cues from the producer, or are they telling you what they need, or when you're going live.
Now you got an iPod there.
Yeah, now you're just hooked into your phone. Social media, how has that changed? Everything breaks on social media now. It doesn't break on television stations.
It doesn't. And that's good and that's bad, because it also allows the opportunity for fake news purveyors
Well, there you go.
to
Yeah.
assault the truth.
Right. And we were talking about that the other day. The chief of HCC Police joins us on one of our shows weekly, and we were talking about the coronavirus, and he said the importance is to make sure you find a credible source when you're reading something on the internet, because not all news sites out there are giving you the best information, and people have a tendency to just share information without verifying.
Without verification. And again, as a journalist, we
Right.
know if we put it out there, we've got it. We own
Right.
it. And if we own it and it's wrong, we own that
You're
too.
the one that it gets back to. Was there, you know, back in the day when we were on the streets, there seemed to be much more of a reliance and a partnership with print journalism. Print's kind of gone away now, and I always thought that was vital for the news industry itself.
I mean, in the old days, the real old days when I worked in
Right.
Washington, D.C., my editor would give me a clipping from the Washington
Yeah.
Post. And I didn't hold that as Bible, but I knew some very careful minds had built that article
Yeah.
for a reason. I definitely had to confirm it, and a lot of that was bounce off.
Yeah.
I would take that. I would say, Senator Leahy, the Washington Post reports,
Right.
or Senator Domenici, the Washington Post reports, or the New York Times reports. That happens only on high levels today.
Well, you know, on kind of along that lines, and back, people will say, well, you worked for Fox, you know, look what the Fox News channel is. You must have been, the reporting you had, they had to have been telling you what to do at Fox 26. My answer was no, they never
When we
did.
worked at Fox
Yeah,
together,
it was not that way.
it was not that way.
Yeah.
Roger Ailes was not in charge yet.
Right, yeah. It was totally different, and now you really have to watch your news sources, and even when you see it on an ABC or CNN, it isn't automatically like the truth like it used to be 20 years ago.
There is definitely a slant and a bent to every one of our network. I mean, CBS
Yeah.
has got its own bent. ABC has got their own bent.
Right.
NBC has definitely got their own bent. And Fox News, well, I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, everybody's got their bend these days. I want to get into a little lighter side and some of your favorite stories. One favorite story, we've only got a few minutes left, but you were telling me about this earlier involving horse meat.
I was in New York at CNN, and there was a vendor selling horse meat burgers.
Did you try one?
I tried one. You see it in the piece. and I did one of my famous Charles Osgood rhyming pieces.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it's moments like that where you can throw something funny together that's not real news, but on the other hand is news.
Sure.
I like doing those things.
Well, you know, you watch CBS Morning News that comes on the weekend, that Sunday morning with
Yeah.
CBS. That's certainly one show where those type of pieces fit in, and they
Yeah.
stand out on their own.
Yes.
They really do. And it's fun doing those pieces, too.
And it is something that pulls you out of the doldrums of breaking sad news.
Right.
It's the mayonnaise in the sandwich.
It is, you know, and that was one of the things towards the end of my run in news was the sad stories really do, after years, they take their toll on you. And when you work a morning shift and you work an overnight shift, your morning is really, you're following murders and you know, all the homes burning down.
Overnight family crimes of passion.
And you're asking people how they feel, you know? How do you think they feel? You
Yeah.
know, they're at the worst times of their lives. But it was fun while it lasted. I enjoyed my time there, and you know, I enjoyed having a chance to work with you many years ago.
Great to work with you, Todd.
You know, Scotty Berrett, I appreciate you reconnecting with me over the past couple of weeks and joining us on the show. I'm sure we're going to see you back here and on other shows in the future.
Thank you, Todd.
And thank you for joining me on The Story Behind the Story. If you'd like to subscribe to all of our podcasts, you can download the audio versions at hccs.edu/podcast. For The Story Behind the Story, HCC TV, I'm Todd Duplantis. We'll see you next time.